The question that I'd like to answer today comes from Jake on Facebook. Now, Jake had asked me this question once before, and it didn't get answered, and so he asked it again, this time in a lot of capital letters. So Jake is obviously really serious about getting a reply, and so I figured I'd go ahead and respond. In a video of yours, you state that you are an anarchist. Given the meaning of anarchy, no person may rule over another. Why is it you believe that a hierarchical structure is present within the world of spirit? Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I do want to clarify for those who don't know or are misinformed about this subject. When I'm talking about anarchism, and I'm defining myself as an anarchist, I'm not referring to what's commonly thought of when we think of anarchy, which really is an idea that anarchy is violent and chaotic. It's not. That anarchism is the idea that, as Jake points out, no man or person may rule over another. Now, when we say rule over another, we need to be clear that we're talking about a violent or coercive relationship. When two or more people come together, they'll assume a hierarchical structure if it's to the benefit of everybody involved. If all parties are getting something out of fitting into this hierarchical structure, then it's a way, an organization that people have created to be able to interact together, work together towards a common goal. Let's take, for example, a sports team. Now, each one of the players on the sports team recognizes a specific hierarchy, and the coach is who they'll defer to as kind of the leader, the shot caller, and it'll go down quarterback all the way through the entire team. Now, nobody's being forced into these positions, but they're knowing, everybody has an awareness of the strengths and weaknesses and capabilities of each person on that team and how they fit into that. That doesn't mean the hierarchical structure can't be challenged. That entities, whether they were talking about a spiritual hierarchy or people within the ranks of these assumed hierarchical structures, like sports teams, where the anarchist comes in is when there's force or coercion, or the threat of force or the threat of violence that's used to coerce others into assuming a certain place in this hierarchical structure. And that if you challenge that structure, if you challenge that system, they will put you down. In the United States, they could put you down in a lot of ways that could be a permanent deal. And in a lot of the countries around the world, it's the exact same thing. We cannot opt out. We cannot quit the team. The governments of this world have enslaved their own people. And they've done it through force and through violence and through threat of violence. That we are acquiescing to this hierarchical structure, not because it does us any good, because it does not do us any good. It harms our ability to do the best that we can with our lives. The anarchist ideal is not chaos and violence in the streets, but it's merely getting the violent bullies out and letting the peaceful citizens come together, organize themselves however they want to organize themselves, rule themselves however they want to, and that any hierarchical structure that they build and create will be of their volition to take part of. We, the people, are fully capable of taking care of ourselves, of making responsible choices for ourselves, or, if we don't make responsible choices, for bearing the responsibility of those choices so that we can learn. From what I've seen, the spirit worlds are actually very anarchistic. That each of these demonic kings, these overlords, these even archangels, all of the beings are serving and existing in the capacity that they wish to serve and exist in. And that there's a mutual exchange in every interaction with spirits. It may not be an exchange that humans would recognize as valuable to them, but there's an energetic exchange, there's an attention exchange. There's a power exchange that is very valuable to both the magician and the spirit. And if that exchange wasn't there, they wouldn't be part of interacting with us. And they wouldn't interact with each other in the ways that they do. When early demonologists started really putting these lists of spirits and these really compendiums of these infernal worlds and these demons that inhabited it, as well as the supposedly greater angelic worlds and angelic realms, and they started figuring out how these spirits are interacting, they basically had to use their own vocabularies and impose those on this structure. And so they imposed this extremely hierarchical European monarchy structure on these spirits. Now, not only is that really a false imposition, because that's not how the spirit worlds are arranged. It's only a false thing to push onto the spirits. But it's inaccurate in the way that many of them who are said to serve under and with others come from entirely different cultures. That they're not even from the same region or era. That these are all ancient gods. These are all the first gods worshipped on this planet. The first spirits that came to man's aid when they were called forth with ritual. These very forces and spirits, these entities that are working with us to this day, don't all live in some hell region. They were given form and shape and human attributes in the realms that they arose from, being the cultures that imagined them, being the societies and the religions that fed these spirits, these forces of nature, with a very specific template, an astral matrix that they had created for these forces of nature to be interactable. And as people began to observe them differently, that they shifted into these new masks. But these are all masks. They can be removed and removed and removed, and you remove enough of the masks and you trace back the etymological roots, and you find that these spirits, once again, are the most ancient gods on this planet. Worshipped long before Jehovah was ever a thought in anybody's mind, before that whole concept was ever stolen from the previous pagan religions that they stole them from. I asked Azazel about the infernal hierarchy because it was something that I was extremely curious about as well. And I asked him to just lay out the entire infernal hierarchy for me. Now he said the infernal hierarchy is as follows. And so I got my pen ready, and I was ready to take some serious notes. And he said, the operator, period, end of sentence, and then everything else in existence. This is something that had been told to me when I was writing Kingdoms of Flame, my very first published grimoire. I was writing this in 2002. I mean, it was an intense period, and it was an intense path working to receive that book. And when I was penning it and working with the spirits from it, I kept coming across the intermingling of different spirit classes, different spirit associations that weren't supposed to be going on according to the standard hierarchical structure. So I asked one of these spirits to define that for me, to help me out with this. And he basically had told me the same thing that Azazel told me many years later, that the person who is at the head, or the being at the head of the spiritual hierarchy, is he who is calling the spirit in that moment. Now, when you're performing a ritual, whether you're performing a ritual from the Kabbalistic or Hermetic schools, or if you're performing a ritual from the Tantric schools, or if you're performing your spells and casting spells as any kind of pagan, Christian, Muslim. All of these have the central practice of centering yourself in existence. This is what the mandalas are. This is what the prayer mats are. These are centering yourself in all of creation. And you're centering yourself, and then you're invoking the Spirit of God to dwell within you. Now, what that means is that you are becoming God in that moment. That the Spirit of God, that within you, which is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, rises to the surface, overwhelms the flesh, and commands this world into realignment. In that moment, all spirits, not just spirits, but all things, will see you and recognize you as the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer of all that is. And this is something that theoretical physics is pushing towards. This is something that every magician experiences when the power of the circle around them lights up, and when the energy just fires up in the center, and when they become the commanding force of all elements. And so all of the hierarchical structures, all of the titles that these spirits have are blinds. They're meant to lead you astray. They're meant to confuse you about the reality that all of that is man-made. And that in the moment of evocation, all that exists is you and the Spirit.